Today we're going to talk about how I incorporate the Insta360 One X into my running footage. 9.7 miles, 8 minutes, 59 seconds per mile, taking it nice and easy today, running with the Insta360 One X. And today what I want to talk about is how I incorporate this device, this 360 camera, into my running footage for my videos. But before we get into the video itself, before we go any further, I want to go over some disclosures. I did receive this camera and a run bundle from Insta360. However, they're not paying me to make this video, and they're not going to get a chance to see any of my footage or this video until you guys get a chance to see it on YouTube. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the Insta360 One X. Let's talk about the workflow. I think I'm going to divide it into three main categories. One is capturing footage with this 360 camera. The second is framing the footage after you've captured it. And the third is how do you edit it or get it ready for distribution, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, or just putting it on your Facebook feed, whatever it may be. And in an effort to keep things really tight and not make this like a 35-minute video, I'm going to go over each of the things relatively briefly. If there's anything more that you want to hear about or see things in more detail, like click by click, let me know about that and put it in the comments. And if there's enough interest in either of these subtopics, I'll be happy to make another video. But in terms of capturing with this device, I think a key part to using the Insta360 One X is this selfie stick. It's by Insta360. It's designed for bullet time, and it extends really far. I think it's more of like a 4-foot selfie stick, so it's really long, and in order to stay strong for that length, it has to be pretty rigid, and it ends up being pretty heavy. So that was my main concern with this. And if you think carrying a GoPro is going to be too heavy for your runs, this is probably going to be too heavy as well. But ultimately, I think it's worth it because of the fact that I think that the Insta360 One X really benefits from having a little bit of difference away from you as a subject in terms of capturing footage. I've been experimenting with holding it at different lengths, either just completely slammed down in terms of as short as a selfie stick will go, and as far as a selfie stick will go. And I don't think you always need to have it completely fully extended, but having it a little bit more extended than this is generally right. And in terms of the operation, you're gonna turn it on by holding this button down here. And then the default is to get to the camera setting. So then you're gonna have to hit the power button instead of holding it, then you'll hit it one more time to get to your video settings. I think the default for the video settings is to put it into bullet time, or in hyperlapse. So you have to go into the settings and change it so your default is just standard as well. But once it's set up, then I'll hit the record button and you're off to the races and you're recording. And with a GoPro, where I'm very careful as to where I kind of put it, with this you kind of just set the horizon level that you want, and then you know that you can pivot and move around from there. Where it's facing or pointing at doesn't really matter so much, but where it is kind of in the vertical and in the horizontal axis is important, and then also movement along those axes is also important as well. But the idea is you kind of want to keep things still. And what I've noticed is sometimes, at least in the first run, I was kind of wanted to be really like selfie stick about it and keep my arm out, but then because of the magic of the Insta360, it deletes the selfie stick that you're holding. I think that somehow there must be like position sensors in it that know like the relative angle things are moving, because no matter what distance I have this at, I mean, this selfie stick is just a telescoping selfie stick. There's no like Bluetooth communication that's going back and forth between these two. So no matter what distance this was, this thing was still figuring out how to delete it all the way up to like my fingers. It never like completely obliterated my hand. It always just deleted the stick. So it just somehow knows what just the stick is. Well, I don't know, maybe it's just smart video editing as well. It can just pick up the extra contrastiness of the black selfie stick. I don't know. I'll test it with a clear selfie stick to see if that does any different. One thing to keep in mind is this has a really aggressive battery management. And so after it senses a couple of seconds or a handful of seconds of inactivity, it'll go into standby mode. To wake it up from standby mode, you hit any of the buttons. Again, for me, it usually ends up being the record button. So to record, I have to actually hit the record button twice. And so once to wake up the camera again, and another time to actually start the recording. I've lost a couple of clips because I wasn't aware of that. So that's something also to keep in mind. But once I'm done recording, then what I typically do is I start holding it from here. And so then I'm running this way. And I do the same thing if I'm holding a GoPro with a selfie stick as well. I don't always run with it here because this, the center of gravity, you're at like the opposite end of the center of gravity. And so it gets a little bit tiresome to do that. So I usually hold it here in the middle, and you're kind of running with it like this. That for me is a little bit easier to manage, and I'm less worried that I might accidentally kind of hit someone with it when I do it like that. So that's how I run with it. That's how I'm holding it. When I'm holding it, I'm typically trying to figure out a way to hold my hands in a way that, like, when this stick is deleted, it will just look like I'm kind of normal. And so I want to lean into the fact that the software is so able to delete the selfie stick that when it is deleted, my hand doesn't look like it's just kind of like doing something weird on its own. So that's something else that I try to keep in mind as I'm running with this thing. I'm still trying to figure out kind of like where the best hand placement is, but I'm working on it, and I think it's going to be a matter of preference. And the last thing that I'll mention in terms of capturing the video is battery life. So it does have a removable battery in the side here, and the battery life has been pretty good. Today's was the longest run that I've been on with it, and the battery life did well, but there is aggressive battery management, and by the end of the run, at least according to like the icon in terms of how much battery life I had left, I had very little battery life left. So I'm not sure if it'll go the full length of a marathon or even longer. If you're going to be running for a much longer time, then I would definitely recommend turning it actually off versus relying on the standby mode. Now, once you have the footage, that's where you kind of you have to frame it. And so what I have to do is I have to tell the video where in the 360 degrees that I can look at do I want to focus in on. And so I have to then get the footage off of this and onto my phone. And not necessarily on my phone. I can get it onto my laptop as well, because there are two options. One is you can edit your 360 footage in a desktop video editing app, and you put it into Insta360, which is a free piece of software that Insta360 puts out, or you can use the Insta360 app on your phone. And there's benefits and drawbacks to both. The benefit of using the desktop-based software is that then I could just pop the SD card out, and there's only one SD card that you have to worry about with this camera, which I think is really convenient and nice. And then you could just bulk move those onto your laptop and then start editing from a laptop, which for me, whenever I'm doing anything that requires a lot of precision, I usually want to sit at a laptop and do that. The other option is you have to get the content off of the camera and onto your phone and use the app. Now, the benefit of using the app is I think that it's much more intuitive to frame 360-degree footage using your phone. And that's because while on the Insta360 app, you can use keyframing to kind of figure out where do you want movements to start and where do you want them to end. It's a lot harder, at least in the Insta360 app, to control the speed at which cameras move. And so I guess that's, I got to work on my keyframing a little bit more. But I feel like the transition and the movements are very kind of abrupt. There's no way to make the keyframing, or at least the changes from one camera position to another, smoother, or have those keyframe changes of more of a Bezier curve rather than a straight, like kind of jumps from one position to another. Kind of keyframing movement, it's kind of hard to explain if you're not really familiar with what keyframing is. If you do want to learn more about keyframing, because it's a general video editing term, again, let me know about that in the comments too, and I'll make a separate video about that. That will be a little bit broader about keyframing generally, rather than just about it in the Insta360. But another problem that I had with the Insta Studio app is, and I don't know if it's just, I'm just doing something wrong with it, is I couldn't get it to bulk export. Every time I framed a 360 video, I would have to render it out into a 1920 by 1080 clip of footage. But then I couldn't like go and continue working, or I couldn't bulk export a whole bunch of them. If I tried to batch export a whole bunch of video clips, it would only export them to 360 footage, which isn't helpful to me because I want to make it into video clips that I could then insert into a video editor like Final Cut. So I had some problems there. I spent a lot of time waiting, but that problem also isn't limited to just the desktop app. I also had problems with the Insta360 app as well, where it looks like I have the option to do a lot of framing on multiple clips, but I didn't have the ability to batch export them. So I'd have to frame one clip, figure out what all the movements and the panning is, but then I'd have to export it, wait for that, then I could work on the next one. And there's additional problems with working with your phone as well, in terms of I've always bought just the base level model iPhone in terms of memory storage, and it's never been a problem until now, because these 360 files are relatively large. In order to get them off the camera and onto the phone, I found myself just deleting like just lots of stuff and moving stuff off the phone, and then basically getting 1 or 2 or maybe 3 360 clips onto the phone, editing those in terms of framing them, rendering out a video into 1920 by 1080 that was, static, and then deleting those clips from my phone in terms of the 360 footage, then downloading them more. So it was like everything was like piece by piece by piece, and then I still had that problem of frame it, render it, wait, get the next one, maybe download another clip from the camera to the phone. And you can use Wi-Fi or an included cable, which speed things up a little bit in that regard, and that process works really well. But I just couldn't download a whole bunch at once. And so I found myself like just getting a backlog of stuff because I kept going on more runs and collecting more footage, but I didn't have time to like do all this shuffling around of the data. So that was a problem for me. But the payoff from using it on the phone is that you can then do the framing by essentially using your phone as your camera angle selector, and instead of using keyframes, you just physically move the phone. So if you wanted to have a shot where the camera is moving smoothly in this direction and also maybe pushing in, you just hold down the record button on the phone and you move the phone as you're watching the footage that you've collected in the 360 camera, and then slide your thumb over to control the zoom. So if you wanted to zoom in more, or if you wanted to zoom further out, you go to this direction, or I guess the right for you guys. And then to zoom back in, you move to the left. So I'm doing it backwards for me, but the correct way for you. So this would be zooming in and this would be zooming out. If you go all the way this way, then you're at Tiny Planet. And so you can control those movements really intuitively and very quickly. If you want to look down at something, you do this. If you want to look up, and so you can control all these kinds of movements while also controlling the level of zoom. And so it's very intuitive to do it that way, and so much faster for me. And I've been keyframing stuff for a long time, and so I'm relatively comfortable with it, but still doing it this way in terms of framing 360 video was much faster on the camera. But again, the overall workflow, this part really slowed me down with the framing, and it's something that I'm not used to because I've not worked with 360 footage before, and I assume that with more experience, I'll get much faster at it. So I'm trying to like not be too hard on how long this takes, but it did take a long time. It substantially increased the amount of time it takes me not only to capture a video, edit it and render it and distribute it, but just the framing part took longer than all other steps of the process combined. And so it's been a little bit frustrating for me, especially this week has been really busy with work, and it's going to be crazy the next couple of weeks. So I'm a little bit concerned about just how long it takes. But I do think that it's ultimately worth it, at least for some shots. And so I'll be going over in a future video the whole like am I going to use this only, or where does this fit with using a GoPro, using an iPhone, using an Insta360 One X, using a DJI Spark as a drone? Like, where do these all kind of fit in a future video? But this video is already getting super long. So once I get to the point where I framed it, then you have to export it. And what's nice, if you use the phone, you can do this on the desktop app too, but it works a lot better if you're using it on the phone, is I can hit a button and make it vertical video so that I could just pump out a very little clip and send it to my Instagram story, or take a quick screenshot and then save it to my phone and then post that as my Instagram post, and then hit another button and then export it to 1920 by 1080 video, so then I can then put it into a YouTube video. All those things are relatively easy to do from the phone app. You could do all those things from the desktop app as well, but if you're making vertical video for an Instagram story or a screenshot for an Instagram post, you then have to push that back to your phone. So there's a lot more extra steps if I did it the other way around. So I prefer to do everything in the phone. The only problem is, then you're relying on the processing power of the phone, which may or may not be a problem for you. And you're also severely limited by the storage that's on your phone, which may or may not be a problem for you. It probably is. And in either of it, on both sides, you're still waiting a lot of times to frame something, export it, then you have to wait, and then you could work on the next one, frame it, export it, and then wait. So there's a lot of kind of waiting. But in the end, for some of the clips, it's really just amazing what kinds of footage that you could get out of this camera. So ultimately, it's worth it for some of the shots. Other shots, there's sometimes where I think a GoPro would have done just as well, if not better. And so I'll go into further detail in terms of when I would use which ones and kind of how I'm going to pick all those in a subsequent video. That's my workflow. Let me know if you have any questions about that, or if there's anything in specific that you'd like me to go into more detail into. Let me know more about that. I do have a couple of things that I have plans, but I'd like to hear from you guys too in terms of what is most pressing for you, so I can prioritize that stuff. Now, before I go for today, I want to remind you guys about the charity runner for the week. It's PK Wong. PK is going to be running the London Marathon coming up in just about a month. And PK is raising money for Sense, a charity in the UK that aims to help people with complex disabilities to be understood and feel connected so that they can experience the world at their full potential. I've been happy to donate $70 to PK's fundraising efforts, and I'll post links in the description in case you'd like to learn more. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Yo, what's going on?